The elevator ascended with barely a whisper, a testament to German engineering and Gideon Lockhart's insistence on perfection. 58 floors in 32 seconds. The polished steel walls reflected a distorted image of the CEO, tall, immaculate in his charcoal Brioni suit, with eyes that hadn't blinked in over 90 seconds. The digital display ticked upward. 54, 55, 56. Gideon's nostrils flared imperceptibly. Something was wrong. The air pressure had shifted, carrying with it a scent that didn't belong in his building. Copper, salt, warmth, blood. His blood would have remained cold regardless, but now it seemed to crystallize in his veins. Not any blood. Hers. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the executive floor. Gideon stepped out, his Italian leather shoes making no sound on the marble. The reception area was empty, Sienna's desk pristine as always. Laptop closed at a perfect right angle to the edge, single orchid in full bloom. The Mont Blanc pen he'd given her for her 5th anniversary precisely parallel to her Smithson planner. But no Sienna. He paused, inhaling deeply. The scent trail led down the eastern corridor, away from his office, toward the executive medical suite. Dr. Prentice kept his hours until 9 p.m. It was now 8:47. The cleaning staff wouldn't arrive for another hour. Gideon moved with the fluid economy of a predator, each step deliberate. The corridor's motion sensors triggered the lights ahead of him, soft ambient illumination that cast no shadows. The temperature seemed to drop with his passing, the building itself responding to his mood. His phone vibrated once in his pocket. He ignored it. In 300 years, he had learned that true emergencies rarely announce themselves by text. The scent grew stronger. Beneath the copper tang of blood lay the familiar notes he'd come to associate exclusively with Sienna: vanilla, almond oil from the hand cream she applied exactly 4 times daily, and that indefinable human warmth that made her unique among his staff. The medical suite doors were closed but not locked. Gideon placed his palm against the frosted glass, feeling the subtle vibration of voices within. The glass was cool beneath his palm, but beyond it he sensed heat, the elevated temperature of distress. He pushed the door open without knocking. CEOs didn't knock, and kings certainly didn't. The reception area of the medical suite was empty, but the inner examination room door stood ajar. Light spilled out in a harsh fluorescent wedge across the polished floor. Gideon caught fragments of hushed conversation. Should call him. Not yet. Let me finish. Amount of blood loss is concerning. Dr. Prentice's voice, clinical but with an undercurrent of tension. And beneath it, almost too faint for human ears, the slightly elevated heartbeat that Gideon would recognize anywhere. Sienna's pulse, racing at 112 beats per minute, approximately 32 beats above her normal resting rate. Unacceptable. Gideon moved through the reception area, his reflection fragmenting across the glass-fronted cabinets. The examination room door yielded to his touch, swinging open to reveal a tableau that sent a surge of something ancient and violent through his chest. Sienna lay on the examination table, her normally impeccable blouse unbuttoned at the collar, the silk stained with a spreading crimson bloom. Her chestnut hair had come loose from its usual French twist, falling across her too pale face. "Doctor." Prentice stood over her, pressing a gauze pad to her neck, his latex-gloved hands already soaked through with red. The doctor looked up, his face draining of color when he saw Gideon in the doorway. "Mr. Lockhart, I was about to call you." Gideon's gaze never left Sienna. It wasn't an accusation, merely a statement of fact. The wound was on the left side of her neck, precisely where the carotid artery pulsed beneath delicate skin. 2 puncture marks. ragged and torn, not the clean surgical precision that Gideon himself would have employed. Amateur work, feeding without finesse. Sienna's eyes fluttered open, focusing with visible effort. "Gideon," she whispered. The first time in 5 years she'd used his first name. "I'm sorry about the Westlake meeting." Silence. The word emerged soft as falling snow, but it froze the room nonetheless. Even the electronic beep of the blood pressure monitor seemed to hesitate. Dr. Prentice swallowed audibly, his Adam's apple bobbing beneath the tight collar of his shirt. "She's lost approximately 1.2 pints of blood. I've administered fluids and applied coagulants to the wound, but who? Not a question. A demand." The doctor's hands trembled slightly as he replaced the soaked gauze with fresh material. She was found in the east stairwell by security. She was unconscious when they brought her in. She regained consciousness approximately 7 minutes ago. Gideon approached the table, the temperature in the room dropping perceptibly with each step. The fluorescent lights flickered once, then stabilized. He looked down at Sienna, noting the blue-tinged lips, the dilated pupils, the minute tremors in her fingertips where they clutched the edge of the examination table. "Leave us," he said to the doctor, not bothering to look at him. "Mr. Lockhart, I need to monitor her condition." 30 seconds. Still not looking away from Sienna. The doctor hesitated, then stripped off his gloves with a snap and retreated, closing the door behind him with a soft click. Alone with Sienna, Gideon allowed himself to inhale fully, cataloguing every nuance of scent in the room. Beyond her blood and fear, there was another marker, familial. His jaw tightened imperceptibly. He reached down, his pale fingers hovering just above the fresh gauze on her neck. "Who did this to you?" His voice remained level, almost conversational, but the air in the room seemed to compress with each syllable. Sienna's eyes widened slightly. Her pulse jumped. He could hear it accelerate, the rush of blood through damaged vessels. I didn't see clearly. It happened so fast." Her voice cracked on the last word. Lie. 5 years as his executive assistant had taught her many things, but never how to lie effectively to him. Her left eyelid twitched, a tell he'd noted during her first performance review. Gideon placed one hand flat on the examination table beside her head, leaning closer. The overhead lights cast his shadow across her face. Again, she swallowed, wincing as the movement pulled at her wound. It was dark in the stairwell. I was coming back from legal on 56. Someone grabbed me from behind. Her fingers twisted the hem of her skirt, the knuckles whitening. I thought it was a robbery at first, but they didn't take anything. Not my phone, not my access card. Nothing. Another lie, though this one contained fragments of truth. Gideon's nostrils flared slightly. The scent signature was unmistakable now. Cyrus, his brother's distinctive cologne, that ridiculous Tom Ford blend he insisted on importing, mingled with the genetic markers they shared. But beneath that, something else. A chemical tang. Desperation. Did he speak? Gideon asked, already knowing the answer. A tear slipped from the corner of Sienna's eye, tracking a glistening path to her temple. "He said to tell you that blood debts require blood payment." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He said you'd understand." The lights flickered again, longer this time. In the corridor outside, something electronic whined and died. Gideon straightened, his face a study in stillness. 5 centuries of practiced control kept his expression neutral, but deep within his chest, something ancient and terrible uncoiled. Cyrus had always been reckless, impulsive, a child playing at immortality. But this crossed a line that could not be redrawn. Sienna reached up, her fingers stopping just short of touching his sleeve. "What does it mean? What debt?" Gideon looked down at her hand, hovering inches from the fine wool of his suit. In 5 years, she had never initiated physical contact. The protocol breach spoke volumes about her mental state. "It means my brother has made a critical error in judgment." He stepped back, creating distance. "You will remain here under Dr. Prentice's care until I return, your brother." Sienna struggled to sit up, the movement causing fresh blood to seep through the gauze. Cyrus did this, but why would he be still? Gideon pressed the call button on the wall. "You've lost enough blood, Doctor." Prentice entered immediately, as if he'd been waiting just outside the door. His forehead gleamed with perspiration despite the room's chill. "She requires a transfusion," Gideon said, not phrasing it as a question. "Type AB negative. You have it in your reserves." The doctor nodded quickly. "Yes, we keep all rare types on hand for executive staff. I'll begin the protocol immediately. You will not leave her side until I return." Again, not a request. No visitors, no calls, no exceptions. Dr. Prentice swallowed. "Understood, Mr. Lockhart. And if your brother should, my brother will not be returning to this building." Gideon's voice remained soft, but something in his tone made the doctor take an involuntary step backward. "Ever?" Gideon moved to the door, then paused, his back to the room. "Sienna?" "Yes." Her voice sounded small, diminished by blood loss and fear. "How long has Cyrus been attempting to contact you?" The silence stretched, punctuated only by the steady beep of the monitoring equipment. Gideon could hear her heartbeat accelerate again, the slight catch in her breath as she weighed truth against self-preservation. 3 weeks, she finally admitted. "It started with emails to my personal account, then text messages from unlisted numbers. I blocked them all." The examination table paper crinkled as she shifted. "I didn't report it because I thought I was handling it." Gideon turned slightly, his profile sharp against the light. "And today he called the direct line at my desk, said he needed to speak with you urgently, that it was a family matter." Her voice strengthened slightly. "I told him to go through proper channels. That's when he said he'd be waiting in the stairwell, that he knew my routine." Another tear escaped. "I should have called security." "Yes," Gideon agreed, his tone devoid of accusation. "You should have, Doctor." Prentice busied himself preparing the transfusion equipment, the glass bottles clinking softly as he avoided looking at either of them. Gideon turned fully now, studying Sienna with clinical detachment. The wound was amateur work, but the intent had been clear. Cyrus hadn't been feeding, he'd been sending a message. The location, the depth, the ragged edges all pointed to deliberate cruelty rather than hunger. "You will recover," he stated, as if his words alone could make it certain. "Dr. Prentice will ensure it." The doctor nodded quickly, inserting the IV line into Sienna's arm with practiced efficiency. "The transfusion will restore her volume within hours. The wound itself should heal within 10 days," Gideon finished for him. "With minimal scarring." Sienna's eyes widened slightly. "How can you be so sure?" Instead of answering, Gideon removed his suit jacket with precise movements, folding it over his arm. The white shirt beneath was immaculate, the platinum cufflinks catching the light as he approached the examination table. "Dr. Prentice," he said quietly, "turn around." The doctor hesitated, then complied, facing the cabinets. Gideon leaned down, his lips close to Sienna's ear. "My brother believes he has taken something from me," he whispered, so low that only she could hear. "He is mistaken. Nothing that is mine can ever truly be taken." His fingers brushed the gauze at her neck, coming away with a small smear of her blood. He straightened, bringing his fingertips to his nose, inhaling once with closed eyes. When his eyes opened again, something ancient and terrible flickered behind them, there and gone so quickly that Sienna would later convince herself she had imagined it. "Rest," he commanded, retrieving his jacket. "I will attend to Cyrus." He moved to the door, his steps soundless on the tile floor. The room seemed to exhale as he left, the temperature rising several degrees in his absence. In the corridor, the lights stabilized, the electronic systems resuming their normal functions. Dr. Prentice turned back to Sienna, his hands shaking slightly as he adjusted the transfusion rate. "He'll fix this," he said, with the desperate conviction of a man trying to reassure himself. "Mr. Lockhart always fixes everything." Sienna stared at the closed door, her fingers pressed against the gauze at her neck. "That's what I'm afraid of," she whispered. In the executive elevator, descending to the parking garage, Gideon removed his phone and sent a single text message. No words, just a series of coordinates. The hunt had begun. The coordinates pinged on the small screen of Gideon's phone, a pulsing red dot moving through the city grid. He slid the device into his pocket as the elevator continued its descent, the soft hum of machinery, the only sound breaking the silence. The parking garage lights flickered as he approached, dimming in his presence like frightened animals. His Bentley waited in its reserved space, glossy black and predatory. The driver's door opened before he reached it, not by his hand, but by the subtle manipulation of electronic systems that bent to his will when his control slipped. A minor tell. He would need to be more careful. Gideon settled into the leather seat, inhaling the scent of polished wood and premium hide. He placed his hands on the steering wheel, noticing a microscopic fleck of Sienna's blood still clinging to his index finger. For a moment, he simply stared at it, this tiny fragment of her essence. With deliberate slowness, he brought the finger to his mouth and tasted. The flavor exploded across his tongue, copper and salt and something uniquely Sienna. His pupils dilated instantly, the dashboard lights reflecting in black pools that momentarily consumed the gray of his irises. His knuckles whitened against the steering wheel, the leather creaking under his grip. "Cyrus," he whispered, the name like venom on his lips. The engine roared to life without his key in the ignition. Another slip. He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and when he opened them again, the preternatural darkness had receded from his gaze. Control reasserted, cold and absolute. The Bentley glided through the underground garage, headlights cutting through shadow. The security gate lifted automatically as he approached, the guard inside the booth straightening instinctively, a hand rising in nervous salute. Gideon acknowledged him with the slightest incline of his head, a gesture that would be recounted later with inexplicable pride. He merged into the night traffic of downtown, following the pulsing dot on his phone. The tracking system had been Sienna's idea, implemented 6 months ago after a competitor had attempted to poach key executives. She had never known that Gideon had modified it, adding capabilities that existed in no commercial technology. The traffic lights ahead turned green in sequence as he approached, the city's infrastructure bending unconsciously to his passage. A subtle manipulation, one he rarely indulged in, but tonight efficiency trumped discretion. The coordinates led him toward the warehouse district, now gentrified into the city's most exclusive entertainment zone. The pulsing dot had stopped moving, settling at a location Gideon recognized immediately: hemoglobin. The irony was not lost on him. His brother had always possessed a particular brand of arrogance that bordered on suicidal. Gideon parked 2 blocks away, preferring to approach on foot. The night air carried the sense of the city to him in layers: exhaust fumes, restaurant kitchens, perfume from passing pedestrians, and beneath it all, the constant undercurrent of human life. Pulses and breath and warm bodies moving through the darkness, unaware of the predator in their midst. He walked unhurriedly, his footsteps silent, despite the hard soles of his Italian shoes. His phone vibrated once in his pocket. A text from Dr. Prentice. Patient stable, transfusion complete. Resting now. He did not reply. The doctor expected none. The club entrance came into view, a converted warehouse with a discreet sign glowing crimson against black brick. A line of hopefuls stretched down the block, dressed in their finest, all vying for entry to the city's most exclusive night spot. The irony of the club's name and theme was a private joke among Gideon's kind. Hiding in plain sight had always been their most effective strategy. 2 bouncers guarded the velvet rope, massive men with earpieces and impassive expressions. Their eyes widened fractionally as Gideon approached, recognition immediate. He was not a regular patron, but his face was known in all the right places. Mr. Lockhart, the larger of the two, said, unhooking the rope without hesitation. An unexpected pleasure. Gideon inclined his head slightly. Is he inside? The bouncer's expression revealed nothing, but his pulse quickened, a thunderous rhythm to Gideon's sensitive ears. I'm not sure who. Don't, Gideon interrupted, his voice soft but carrying an edge that made both men stiffen. Is my brother inside? A bead of sweat formed at the bouncer's temple despite the cool night air. VIP section, sir. Arrived about 40 minutes ago. His security. 4 men, armed. Gideon nodded once, slipping a folded bill into the man's jacket pocket as he passed. The bouncer would later find it was enough to cover 3 months' rent. Inside, the club pulsed with carefully orchestrated sensory assault. Music at precisely the right volume to energize without preventing conversation. Lighting designed to flatter every complexion while maintaining an air of mystery. The scent of exclusive cologne and perfume mingling with top-shelf liquor. Gideon moved through the crowd without touching anyone, yet people stepped aside instinctively, creating a path without conscious awareness of doing so. Conversations paused mid-sentence as he passed, eyes following his progress before their owners even realized they were staring. The main floor was a carefully curated tableau of beautiful people, engaged in the theater of nightlife. Gideon registered it all without interest, his focus narrowed to a single purpose. His gaze swept upward, to the glass-walled VIP section overlooking the dance floor. There, lounging on a white leather sofa with a champagne flute in hand, sat Cyrus. His younger brother by 3 centuries, though they appeared similar in age, both in their apparent late 30s, both blessed with the Lockhart features that had inspired fear and desire across millennia. But where Gideon was winter, Cyrus was autumn, warmer tones, a perpetual flush that mimicked life, eyes that invited rather than commanded. It was a cultivated facade, one that had served him well in luring prey and allies alike. 4 men in tailored suits surrounded him, their jackets cut to conceal shoulder holsters. They scanned the crowd below with practiced vigilance, unaware that the true threat had already arrived. A hostess approached Gideon, her smile professional, but her eyes curious. "Good evening, sir. Can I help you find the VIP section?" he said, his gaze never leaving his brother. "Of course. Do you have a reservation?" "I don't need one." Something in his tone made her step back slightly. I'll check with management." "Don't bother." Gideon finally looked at her, his grey eyes meeting hers. "You want to escort me upstairs?" Now, her pupils dilated, her expression going momentarily blank before a smile spread across her face. Too wide, too eager. Yes, of course. Please follow me. She led him toward the private elevator, her movements slightly mechanical. The security guard stationed there began to raise a hand in question, then froze as Gideon's gaze fell on him. His arm lowered slowly, and he stepped aside, eyes fixed straight ahead. The elevator doors closed silently, enclosing Gideon and the hostess in a small space of polished steel and subtle lighting. She stood unnaturally still, her breathing shallow. "When we arrive," Gideon said quietly, "you will return to your duties. You will remember escorting me, but nothing unusual about our interaction." She nodded, her eyes still slightly unfocused. "Yes, sir." The doors opened onto the VIP level, a space designed to make its occupants feel simultaneously exposed to admiring gazes from below and completely separate from the common crowd. Glass walls provided views of the dance floor, while privacy screens could be activated with the touch of a button. Cyrus had not yet noticed his arrival, too engrossed in whatever story he was telling the two women flanking him on the sofa. His security, however, had better instincts. The first of the four men straightened, his hand drifting toward his concealed weapon as he registered Gideon's presence. The hostess departed as instructed, leaving Gideon standing at the entrance to the VIP section. He made no move to approach, simply waiting, his stillness unnatural in the kinetic environment of the club. The security man murmured something into his wrist microphone, alerting his colleagues. One by one, they shifted position, forming a loose perimeter around Cyrus, who remained oblivious, his arm draped around one woman's shoulders as he whispered something that made her laugh. Finally, the lead security man approached Gideon, his expression professionally neutral, despite the tension evident in his shoulders. "Sir, this is a private gathering. I'm going to have to ask you to return downstairs." Gideon regarded him with the mild interest one might show a moderately unusual insect. "Tell my brother I'm here." The man's jaw tightened. "Sir, I don't know who you think is here, but your name is Marcus Devereaux." Gideon interrupted, his voice conversational. "Former Special Forces. Dishonorable discharge after an incident in Kandahar that was quietly buried. 2 children from your first marriage whom you haven't seen in 3 years. A gambling debt to the Costello family that you're paying off through services rendered, and a rather distinctive tattoo on your left shoulder blade. A phoenix, is it not?" The color drained from Marcus's face. "How did you—" "Tell my brother I'm here," Gideon repeated, "or I will tell him why you won't." Marcus swallowed, then nodded once, turning to make his way back to Cyrus. He bent to speak into his employer's ear, his posture rigid with newfound fear. Cyrus's reaction was immediate. His head snapped up, eyes scanning the room until they locked with Gideon's. For a moment, naked panic flashed across his features before he masked it with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He whispered something to the women beside him, who gathered their belongings and departed with curious backward glances. Gideon remained where he stood, making Cyrus come to him. It was a small power play, but in their world such gestures carried weight. Cyrus approached with the careful gait of a man trying to appear relaxed while crossing a minefield. His security moved with him, maintaining their protective formation despite their obvious unease. "Gideon," Cyrus said, when he was close enough to be heard without raising his voice. "What an unexpected pleasure. Slumming it with the mortals tonight." "Dismiss your men," Gideon replied, ignoring the question. Cyrus's smile tightened. "I don't think that would be wise, brother. Not everyone holds you in the same high regard that I do." They are an insult. Dismiss them, or I will." The brothers stared at each other, a silent battle of wills that caused the air between them to seem to thicken. The security team shifted uncomfortably, hands hovering near concealed weapons. Finally, Cyrus sighed dramatically. "Give us the room, gentlemen. Wait by the elevator." Marcus stepped forward. "Sir, I strongly advise against. Did I ask for your advice, Marcus?" Cyrus's tone remained light, but an edge had crept in. "Wait by the elevator." The security team retreated reluctantly, positioning themselves near the exit, but keeping their employer in sight. The other VIP guests, sensing the tension, had already created a wide berth around the brothers. "There," Cyrus spread his hands in a placating gesture. "Just family now. Can I offer you a drink? They have a rather excellent AB negative on the private menu." Gideon stepped closer, and despite himself, Cyrus took a small step back. "You put your hands on what is mine," Gideon said, his voice so low that only his brother could hear it. Cyrus's facade of nonchalance cracked slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about. Her neck bears your fingerprints. Her blood carries traces of your saliva." The assistant, Cyrus, attempted a dismissive laugh that came out slightly strangled. "Really, Gideon, all this over a human? I was merely sampling. Surely you don't begrudge me a small taste of—" Gideon moved. One moment he was standing 3 feet away, the next his hand was wrapped around Cyrus's throat, lifting him slightly so that his expensive shoes barely touched the floor. The movement was too fast for human eyes to track. To any observers, it would appear as though Cyrus had suddenly decided to stand on his tiptoes during their conversation. "She is mine," Gideon whispered, his lips close to his brother's ear. "Not to feed from, not to touch, not to look at for too long. Mine." Cyrus clawed at the hand around his throat, his eyes widening as he realized he could not break the grip. "The others," he gasped, jerking his head toward his security team, who had not yet noticed their employer's predicament. "They see us having a friendly conversation," Gideon replied. "A simple manipulation of perception. You used to be capable of such basic skills before you became soft, dependent on human protectors." He released his grip, and Cyrus staggered slightly, one hand going to his throat. "This is beneath you," he rasped. "She's just a secretary, executive assistant," Gideon corrected mildly, straightening his already immaculate cuffs. "And she is considerably more than her job title, as you well know. Otherwise, you wouldn't have targeted her specifically." Cyrus smoothed down his jacket, attempting to regain his composure. "It was a message, brother. A reminder that your territory is not as secure as you believe." "A message," Gideon repeated, his tone contemplative. "And what response did you anticipate?" Something in his quiet delivery made Cyrus glance nervously toward his security team. They remained by the elevator, watching but unable to hear the conversation. "I expected you to be angry," Cyrus admitted, "to make threats. Perhaps to demand compensation. The usual dance." "The usual dance," Gideon echoed. He turned slightly, looking out over the crowded dance floor below. The humans moved in their choreographed rituals of attraction and rejection, unaware of the predators among them. "Do you know what Sienna whispered while Dr. Prentice treated her wounds?" Cyrus frowned at the apparent non sequitur. "How would I possibly?" "Your name," Gideon continued, as if his brother hadn't spoken. "She whispered your name." "Well, of course she would. I made quite an impression." Cyrus attempted a smirk that faltered under Gideon's steady gaze. "She was concerned for you," Gideon clarified. "Even after what you did, Her first thought was worry about what I might do to you in retaliation. Remarkable, isn't it? Such compassion, even for her attacker. Cyrus shifted uncomfortably. Humans are unpredictable. It's what makes them entertaining. She sees something worth saving in you. Gideon turned back to face his brother fully. I do not share her optimism. The club's music seemed to fade into the background as tension thickened the air between them. Across the room, glasses on a serving tray began to vibrate subtly, the champagne within them rippling in concentric circles. What do you want, Gideon? Cyrus asked, dropping all pretense of bravado. Blood rights, territory concessions. I want you to come with me. Cyrus blinked. Where? The penthouse. Understanding dawned in Cyrus's eyes, followed immediately by fear. No, absolutely not. We can settle this here or at neutral ground. This is not a negotiation, Gideon replied. He glanced toward the security team, who had begun to sense something amiss and were moving closer. Call them off. Cyrus hesitated, calculation evident in his expression. And if I refuse? The temperature in the VIP section dropped perceptibly. The champagne in nearby glasses frosted over. Patrons shivered, looking around in confusion at the sudden cold. Then I will demonstrate exactly how secure my territory is, Gideon said, beginning with your 4 human shields. As if on cue, Marcus clutched suddenly at his chest, dropping to one knee. The other security men rushed to his side, their attention momentarily diverted from their employer. Stop it, Cyrus hissed. You've made your point. Gideon inclined his head slightly, and Marcus gasped as the invisible pressure on his heart eased. He remained on the floor, breathing heavily, while his colleagues helped him to a nearby chair. The penthouse, Gideon repeated. Now, Cyrus glanced around the club, assessing his options. The other VIP patrons were watching with undisguised curiosity. His security team was in disarray. The exits were clear, but he had always known that running from his brother was futile. Fine, he conceded, his voice tight. Let me tell my men. They've been informed. Gideon interrupted. They believe you've decided to resolve our business disagreement privately at my residence. They've been instructed to wait here for further orders. Cyrus stared at him. When did you, while you were weighing your non-existent options? Gideon gestured toward the private elevator. Shall we? They walked side by side, maintaining the illusion of a cordial meeting for any observers. In the elevator, Cyrus leaned against the wall, studying his brother's impassive profile. You've changed, he said finally. There was a time when you would have simply killed me for such an offense. Perhaps I'm evolving. Or perhaps your pet human is having more influence than you care to admit. Cyrus straightened as the elevator reached the ground floor. That's it, isn't it? She's softened you. The doors opened to the main club level, and Gideon stepped out without responding, knowing his brother would follow. They moved through the crowd, which parted instinctively before them, sensing danger without understanding its source. Outside, the night air was crisp with early autumn. Gideon's Bentley waited at the curb, though he had parked it 2 blocks away. Another small demonstration that went unmentioned between them. Get in, Gideon said, opening the passenger door. Cyrus hesitated, one hand on the car's roof. Brother, surely we can. Get in, Gideon repeated, his voice unchanged, but carrying a weight that made the streetlights above them flicker. Cyrus slid into the passenger seat, his movements stiff with reluctance. Gideon closed the door and walked around to the driver's side, his steps measured and unhurried. As they pulled away from the curb, Cyrus stared out the window at the passing city lights. She's really gotten to you, hasn't she? He said quietly. This human girl, Gideon kept his eyes on the road. You mistake restraint for weakness. Do I? Cyrus turned to study his brother's profile. The Gideon I knew would have ripped my heart out through my spine for touching what was his. Instead, you're taking me for a drive. What would the others say if they knew the great Gideon Lockhart had been domesticated? The car accelerated smoothly, the engine purring as they merged onto the highway leading toward the exclusive high-rise where Gideon maintained his penthouse. The city skyline glittered against the night sky, a constellation of human ambition rendered in glass and steel. You still don't understand, Gideon said after a long silence. This isn't mercy, this is precision. Cyrus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Meaning, killing you in the club would have been messy, inefficient. It would have raised questions, required cleanup, created loose ends. Gideon changed lanes, overtaking a slower vehicle. I prefer to be thorough. The implication hung in the air between them. Cyrus swallowed, his earlier bravado evaporating. You can't be serious. Over a human. You continue to fixate on what she is, rather than who she is to me. Gideon's tone remained conversational, as if they were discussing a business merger rather than potential fratricide. A strategic error. They rode in silence for several minutes, the tension in the car thick enough to taste. Finally, Cyrus spoke again, his voice carefully modulated. What would it take to resolve this? Name your price. This isn't a transaction. Everything is a transaction between us. Always has been. Cyrus turned fully in his seat to face his brother. Territory. Blood rights. Access to your financial networks. Name it. Gideon slowed the car as they approached the luxury high-rise, where his penthouse occupied the top 3 floors. The building stood apart from its neighbors, a spire of glass and titanium that caught the moonlight like a blade. You harmed what is mine, he said simply, pulling into the private underground garage. There is no negotiation to be had. The security gate recognized the car automatically, lifting to allow them entry. Gideon guided the Bentley to his reserved space near the private elevator. The garage was silent and empty at this hour, their footsteps echoing as they exited the vehicle. Cyrus followed his brother to the elevator, his movements becoming increasingly reluctant with each step. When the doors opened, he hesitated at the threshold. "Brother," he said, a note of genuine fear entering his voice for the first time. "Reconsider. We are family, the last of our bloodline." Gideon stood inside the elevator, watching him impassively. "Come," he said, the word carrying the weight of centuries of authority. Against his will, Cyrus felt his body responding to the command, stepping into the elevator, though every instinct screamed at him to run. The doors closed behind him with a soft, final sound. "What have you done to me?" he whispered, feeling the compulsion like iron bands around his limbs. Gideon's expression remained unchanged as the elevator began its ascent to the penthouse. "I've reminded you of the natural order of things," he replied. "You seem to have forgotten your place in it." The elevator continued its silent climb, carrying them toward a reckoning centuries in the making. The numbers above Gideon's head ticked upward, marking their ascent to the penthouse. Cyrus pressed himself against the elevator wall, as far from his brother as the confined space allowed. The air between them crackled with ancient power, the kind that had once made kings kneel and armies retreat. "You've always been clever, brother," Cyrus said, his voice strained against the compulsion that held him. "But this is extreme even for you. She's just a human." Gideon's gaze remained fixed on the illuminated floor numbers. "No," he said quietly, "she isn't just anything." The elevator slowed to a stop, and the doors parted silently. Beyond them lay Gideon's sanctuary, A vast open space of polished concrete and glass, minimalist furnishings in blacks and greys, with the eastern wall comprised entirely of floor-to-ceiling windows, currently covered by automated blackout curtains. "After you," Gideon said, gesturing with a slight incline of his head. Cyrus's feet moved against his will, carrying him into the penthouse. The moment they cleared the elevator, Gideon pressed a button on a panel by the door. Steel security shutters slid into place behind them with a heavy mechanical thud. "I've disconnected the override," Gideon said, removing his coat and draping it over a chair. "We won't be disturbed." "This is madness," Cyrus hissed, fighting the invisible bonds that held him in place. "You would break our covenant over a mortal?" Gideon moved to the bar that occupied one corner of the room, selecting a crystal decanter filled with amber liquid. He poured 2 glasses, carrying them across the room with deliberate steps. "You misunderstand," he said, offering one to Cyrus. "The covenant was broken the moment you touched her." Cyrus accepted the glass, his hand trembling slightly. "She would have died eventually anyway. They all do." "Drink," Gideon commanded, and watched as his brother raised the glass to his lips involuntarily. "I wanted you to taste it." 30-year-old Macallan. Her favorite. Cyrus swallowed, his eyes widening as understanding dawned. "You've been drinking with her." "Sharing meals?" "Living," Gideon corrected him. "Something you've forgotten how to do in your endless pursuit of power." He set his own glass down untouched. "You see humans as cattle. I made that mistake once. She taught me otherwise." Outside, the city lights twinkled against the night sky, a constellation of human existence spread below them. Gideon walked to the windows, gazing out at the metropolis he had helped build over generations. "Do you remember Constantinople?" he asked, his voice distant with memory. Before it fell, Cyrus's jaw tightened. "Of course, we were gods among them." "No," Gideon said. "We were parasites, feeding on their achievements while creating nothing of our own." He turned back to face his brother. "I've built something here, something real, with her help." Cyrus sneered, though the effect was diminished by the fear in his eyes. "With her inspiration," Gideon corrected. "She reminded me what it was to be alive, to care about more than just survival." He moved to a sleek console table and opened a drawer, removing a small remote control. With a press of a button, soft lighting illuminated a section of wall Cyrus hadn't noticed before, a gallery of photographs spanning decades. Gideon with presidents, with industry titans, at groundbreaking ceremonies for hospitals, schools, research centers. "This is what I've been doing while you've been playing your games of dominance," Gideon said. "Building a legacy that will outlast even us." Cyrus laughed, a hollow sound. "You've gone soft, sentimental. It doesn't become you, brother." "Perhaps," Gideon acknowledged, "that I've found something you never will." He pressed another button, and a final photograph illuminated, Gideon and Sienna at a company gala, her head thrown back in laughter, his eyes fixed on her with an expression that even to Cyrus was unmistakable. "You love her," Cyrus said. The words part accusation, part realization. Gideon didn't answer. Instead, he moved to the center of the room, unbuttoning his cuffs and rolling up his sleeves with methodical precision. "You know what happens now," he said. It wasn't a question. Cyrus's false bravado crumbled. "Brother, please, we share the same blood. And yet you spilled hers without hesitation." Gideon's voice remained calm, but his eyes had darkened to obsidian. "You will never touch her again." With a flick of his wrist, Gideon released the compulsion that held Cyrus in place. His brother stumbled forward, catching himself against a chair. "You're giving me a chance to fight?" Cyrus asked, straightening. I'm giving you the dignity of choice, Gideon replied. You can face me as an equal, or you can die on your knees. Either way, you will not leave this room. Cyrus's lips curled back, revealing the sharp points of his fangs. You've always underestimated me, brother. With preternatural speed, he lunged across the room, aiming for Gideon's throat. Gideon sidestepped the attack with fluid grace, catching Cyrus's arm and using his momentum to slam him into the wall. The impact cracked the concrete, sending a spiderweb of fractures across the surface. I've never underestimated you, Gideon said, releasing his grip and stepping back. I've simply always been better. Cyrus pushed away from the wall, circling his brother with predatory focus. You've been distracted, weakened by your affection for the human. I've been preparing for this moment for decades. He struck again, faster this time, a blur of movement that would have been invisible to human eyes. His fist connected with Gideon's jaw, snapping his head back with the force of the blow. Before Gideon could recover, Cyrus delivered a second strike to his midsection, driving the air from his lungs. Gideon staggered backward, his hand coming away from his mouth stained with dark blood. Impressive, he acknowledged, rolling his shoulders. You've been feeding well. On the best, Cyrus confirmed with a cruel smile. The fear makes the blood sweeter. Something shifted in Gideon's expression, a hardening, a coldness that seemed to drop the temperature in the room. You always did talk too much. This time it was Gideon who moved, crossing the space between them with such speed that Cyrus had no time to react. His hand closed around his brother's throat, lifting him off the ground with one arm. Cyrus clawed at the grip, his feet dangling uselessly above the floor. I could end you now, Gideon said, his voice terrifyingly soft. Crush your windpipe, tear out your heart. It would be quick. He released his grip suddenly, allowing Cyrus to crumple to the floor. But that would be too merciful. Cyrus gasped for unnecessary breath, a reflex from his human days. What game are you playing? He wheezed. Gideon walked to the window, checking his watch. No game, just waiting. For what? Cyrus demanded, pushing himself to his feet. Dawn, Gideon replied simply. It's been a long time since you've seen the sunrise, hasn't it, brother? Understanding dawned in Cyrus's eyes, followed by genuine terror. You wouldn't. The covenant is broken. Gideon finished for him. By your hand. Panic gave Cyrus renewed strength. He charged at Gideon with the full force of his supernatural power, slamming into him and driving them both across the room. They crashed into the bar, shattering glass and splintering wood. Cyrus's hands found Gideon's throat, his fingers digging into the flesh with enough force to crush steel. I should have killed you centuries ago, Cyrus snarled, his face contorted with rage. Always so righteous, so controlled, playing at being human when we are gods. Gideon didn't struggle against the grip. Instead, he reached up, placing his palm against his brother's chest. We were never gods, he said. Just monsters who lived too long. A pulse of energy emanated from his hand, throwing Cyrus backward across the room. He hit the far wall hard enough to leave a body-shaped indentation in the concrete. Gideon rose to his feet, brushing shards of glass from his clothing. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye, but he paid it no mind. You're right about one thing, he said, advancing on his brother's prone form. I have changed. I remember what it is to care for something beyond myself, beyond our kind. Cyrus struggled to rise, his movements sluggish. What did you do to me? A little something I developed with Dr. Prentice, Gideon explained, crouching beside him. A compound that affects our unique physiology. You'll find your strength fading quickly now. You drugged the whiskey, Cyrus realized, his voice slurring slightly. Gideon nodded. It won't kill you. That pleasure I reserve for myself. He grabbed Cyrus by the collar, dragging him across the floor to the eastern wall of windows. With his free hand, he pressed a button on the wall panel. The blackout curtains began to retract slowly, revealing the first hint of pre-dawn light on the horizon. No, Cyrus whispered, trying to crawl away from the windows. Gideon, please. We're brothers. The last of our line. Gideon's grip remained firm. You should have thought of that before you touched her. He pulled Cyrus to his knees, positioning him directly before the glass, as the curtains continued their inexorable retreat. The sky was lightening now, deep blue giving way to purple and pink at the edges. I want you to understand something before you die, Gideon said, kneeling beside his brother. This isn't just about Sienna, though that would be reason enough. This is about what you've become, what you would turn our kind into, if left unchecked. Cyrus's eyes darted frantically between Gideon and the brightening sky. The others won't stand for this. They'll come for you. Let them come, Gideon replied without concern. They already fear me. After today they'll understand why. The first golden rays of sunlight breached the horizon, sending fingers of light reaching toward the penthouse windows. Cyrus flinched as they drew closer, pressing himself against Gideon in a desperate attempt to escape the inevitable. Brother, he pleaded, his voice breaking. We've survived so much together. Plagues, wars, the Inquisition. Don't end it like this. For a moment, something like regret flickered across Gideon's features. There was a time I would have forgiven anything for the sake of our shared blood, he admitted. But that time passed the moment you decided your pride was worth her pain. The sunlight touched the glass now, filling the room with a warm glow that belied its deadly nature to their kind. Cyrus began to tremble, smoke rising from his skin where the indirect light touched him. You don't have to watch, Gideon said, his voice softening slightly. Close your eyes. Think of Constantinople, of Rome in its glory, of all the ages we witnessed together. Tears of blood tracked down Cyrus's cheeks. I don't want to die, he whispered. None of us do, Gideon replied. That's why we've lived so long. But all things end, brother, even us. With a final press of the button, the curtains fully retracted. Sunlight flooded the penthouse, bathing the room in golden light. Cyrus screamed as his skin began to blacken and peel, the ancient blood in his veins boiling. He clutched at Gideon, who held him firmly in place, his own skin protected by the specially treated fabric of his clothing and the serum Dr. Prentice had developed for him years ago. Sienna. Cyrus gasped through his agony, his body beginning to crumble. She'll never accept what you are. Gideon watched impassively as his brother's features melted away, revealing the monster beneath the beautiful facade. Perhaps not, he acknowledged, but that's my burden to bear, not yours. Cyrus's final scream died in his throat as his vocal cords disintegrated. His body collapsed inward, centuries of unnatural existence reduced to ash in moments. The sunlight continued to pour through the windows, dust motes dancing in the beams where Cyrus had knelt seconds before. Gideon remained still, watching as the last particles of his brother scattered across the polished floor. He felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a hollow certainty that he had done what was necessary. He rose to his feet, brushing the remnants of his brother from his clothing. The sun continued its ascent, warming his face without harm, one of the benefits of Dr. Prentice's research, funded generously over decades. Not true daywalking, but protection enough for moments like this. Gideon pressed another button on the wall panel, and the blackout curtains began to close once more, returning the penthouse to comfortable dimness. He walked to his desk, picking up his phone and dialing a familiar number. "It's done," he said simply, when the call connected. "Have a cleaning crew ready the penthouse. I won't be returning today." He ended the call, then dialed again. This time there was no answer, just the soft beep of Sienna's voicemail. He didn't leave a message. Some things needed to be said in person. The elevator opened silently when he called it, the security protocols recognizing his biometrics. As he descended to the garage level, Gideon reflected on Cyrus's final words. Would Sienna accept what he was, if she knew the truth? It was a question he had avoided for too long. The Bentley purred to life at his touch, the familiar luxury enveloping him as he pulled out of the garage and into the morning traffic. The city was coming awake around him, humans hurrying to jobs, to appointments, to all the small moments that made up their brief lives. He had once viewed their ephemeral existence with pity, even contempt. Now he saw the beauty in it, the urgency, the necessity of making each moment matter, because there were so few of them. The hospital came into view, a modern structure of glass and steel that bore his name on the emergency wing. He parked in the reserved space and made his way through the quiet corridors, nodding to staff who recognized him but knew better than to approach. Sienna's room was where he had left it, though the guards had been changed, a precaution that was no longer necessary but would remain in place nonetheless. They stepped aside without a word as he approached. She was sleeping, her breathing even, her color improved from the night before. The machines monitoring her vital signs beeped softly, a reassuring rhythm that matched the steady beat of her heart. Gideon took his place in the chair beside her bed, reaching out to take her hand in his. At his touch, her eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on his face. "You came back," she murmured, her voice rough from sleep and medication. "I told you I would," he replied, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. She studied his face, noting the almost imperceptible changes, the fading cut above his eye, the slight stiffness in his movements. "Is it over?" she asked. Gideon nodded once. "It's over. He won't hurt you again, or anyone else." Sienna closed her eyes briefly, absorbing this. When she opened them again, there was a question in their depths. "Did you kill him?" For a moment, Gideon considered lying. It would be easier, cleaner, but she deserved better than that. "Yes," he said simply. She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tightening slightly around his. "I should feel something about that," she finally said. "Horror, maybe, or relief. But I just feel tired." "Rest then," he told her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "I'll be here when you wake." She studied him with unexpected intensity. "There's more to you than you've ever let me see, isn't there? More than anyone sees." The question hung between them, laden with implications. Gideon felt the weight of centuries pressing down on him, all the secrets, all the careful distance he had maintained. "Yes," he admitted, "there is. Will you tell me someday?" she asked, her eyelids growing heavy as the medication pulled her back toward sleep. Gideon watched the pulse in her throat, listened to the rush of blood in her veins, the sounds that had once signaled only hunger to him, but now meant something far more precious. Life. Her life. "Someday," he promised, "if you want to know." Her eyes closed, her breathing deepened, but her hand remained in his, fragile, mortal, irreplaceable. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, unaware of the ancient predator who sat vigil over a sleeping woman, or the brother who had been reduced to dust for daring to harm her. In the quiet of the hospital room, with sunlight filtering through partially closed blinds, Gideon Lockhart, CEO, vampire, last of his bloodline, made a silent vow. For her, he would be better than his nature. For her, he would build a world where monsters like his brother could not thrive. For her, he would remember what it meant to be human, even if he never had been.